What's up, everybody? Welcome back to the podcast. Today we have a phenomenal man with a great story. His name is Jess Messias. Am I pronouncing that right?
Perfectly.
Fantastic. And Jess is a physiotherapist. And throughout my journey going back to school, me and Jess, I'll go back for just a moment. Me and Jess worked together as personal trainers at Mansfield in the West Island in Montreal. And it's not that we had a massive relationship over there. I think it's just kind of a mutual respect type of thing. We worked together, we did our thing. But it's not that I knew Jess, intensely. But whenever I reached out to you, Jess, in school, Jess always seemed to be able to, you always responded. And it was like, let's say a total of 3 or 4 times I was thinking about going to physio. I was, trying to see how the industry was. I know you have a unique story. So all that to be said, I'd reach out, you'd reach back, and I'm like, man. And then I would see posts, and I was like, oh, crazy. And I have a past with stomach issues, and then you posted something, and I was like, man, there's layers to this guy. There's layers. So now, as I was thinking about who I felt would be super interesting, you came to mind. And my first question to you would just be simply to give me a little brief background. Maybe share your journey as what got you directed, if you have like a catalyst. What directed you to become a phenomenal physiotherapist?
I appreciate that introduction, man. And look, I got to say, before I introduce myself, as it relates to maybe some of the help that I was able to provide along the way, it was my absolute pleasure, honestly. And to your point, I'm sure we interacted at Mansfield back in the day. I think we were a lot of kind of lone soldiers there, just doing our own thing, filling our pockets as best as we could. But to be able to help someone, it costs nothing. It's free. And a big part of my story is just this, this passion, this adoration that I have for being able to help people whenever possible. And so, again, it was my pleasure to be able to help out. A little bit about me, as you mentioned, I am a physiotherapist by trade. I've kind of gone through different phases of being a physio. I've gone through being very manual therapy focused. I've gone through being very exercise focused. I've been a hybrid physio. But my story is such that I worked in private practice for about 2 years, building up my skills, building my reputation, I suppose, and being able to start helping people. And then I was very fortunate to join a small group that had plans of opening a multidisciplinary facility that included physiotherapy, fitness services, nutrition services, a couple swimming pools as well for other types of fitness. And over the course of about 5.5 years, I helped build, launch, run, and grow that business. And that's where I saw my story sort of go from being purely healthcare or physio focused to being healthcare focused, but also business focused. And what that led to was essentially a role where I was running this facility, still spending time in the clinic, still spending time with patients, doing what I loved. But I found another passion of mine, and that was running businesses and helping people inside these businesses. So not just people dealing with injuries in a physiotherapy clinic, but also people who have personal and professional goals, people just looking to grow in all aspects of life. And I found that healthcare wasn't the only way to be able to help people, but there are other ways. And generally speaking, by simply being a leader in our workspaces or a leader in our communities or a leader in relationships, whatever it may be, there are so many different ways that we can help people. And after about 5.5 years, feeling like I had accomplished what I hoped to at that facility, I decided to move on, and I actually went back to business school. So I'm wrapping up my MBA right now at McGill. And really my goal for going into this MBA program at McGill was to strengthen some of my financial skills, my marketing skills, my accounting skills, get a more concrete education in things that I had learned on the fly in my last job, but never really got that university type education for what it's worth. And ultimately, I did all of this because I said, hey, I love helping people. I felt that one-on-one sessions in a clinic wasn't going to be scalable, wasn't necessarily the way that I could reach the most people. And I thought if I could learn to be a better leader and business person, perhaps I can run some sort of healthcare focused company one day that would allow to, for me personally, have a greater reach. Because if I am helping run something, that means I have a team of healthcare professionals working with me, and together collectively we could reach so many more people than I could ever reach on my own. So that's a little bit about the story. It's been a good year and a half of school, wrapping things up now and looking to see what's next.
So it's fair to say that you're not just a great physiotherapist. Man, that's crazy, because we had a small talk just before, and you could see that I'm like-minded. And in this industry, we spoke very briefly about sometimes we need to think about scalability and all this to be able to afford to continue doing what you love and giving amazing service. So that's fantastic. Let's come back to the physiotherapy aspect. If we focus on the physiotherapy, let's kind of think about what motivated you in that one moment. You know, like what was that like? Because I believe you started off at McGill, and then physiotherapy is a intensely, it is very competitive, and it's just becoming more and more competitive. So kudos to you to, you know, make that happen. But in short, like what was just like the catalyst? What motivated you? Did you have an injury? What was the thing that made you fall in love with physiotherapy?
Yeah. I come from a very healthcare oriented family. My grandfather was a general practitioner. My mom is a pharmacist. And so healthcare, for whatever other reasons as well, was kind of just this thing that I was so invested in from an early age. And it's funny, every group of friends, I think, has like that guy or girl who's like the fitness guy or the health guy or the fitness girl or the health girl, who for whatever reason over time builds up that reputation for being the person that people turn to when they need some sort of advice. Whether this person is qualified or not doesn't matter, but within that group of people, they have kind of separated themselves as that go-to person, right? And I guess looking back on my childhood and my teenage years, I guess I was that guy, and maybe it was because I played a number of different sports. Maybe it was because I was kind of the first of my friends to get into the gym and do that kind of thing. But I think I kind of took on that persona and felt like I was the health guy, the fitness guy, for better or for worse. Not to say I was perfect by any means. Still am not perfect by any means. I do what I can. So I think there was a lot of kind of self-fulfilling prophecy that was built into it. I just saw myself as this person. And when I thought about what I wanted to do after university, it was definitely going to be something related to science. Medical school, dentistry school didn't really speak to me. I didn't see those as career paths that I wanted to go down. And maybe it was, in hindsight, I think it was something to do with the fact that in those careers, you really only see as a medical doctor, you pretty much only see people when they're at their worst. And with the kind of healthcare system that we're in here, you don't get to spend all that much time with people. I'm someone that likes to build relationships. I enjoy the art of building rapport, and I just didn't see that type of job as something that would allow me to do so. When I thought about physiotherapy as another branch of healthcare, I saw it as something that allowed me to tap into that previous history of mine of sports and of fitness. It allowed me to kind of continue on with that persona of being the health or fitness guy amongst my friends. And it was also somewhere where I could work with people going through tough times, help them see the light at the end of the tunnel, but at the same time have the opportunity to spend 30, 40, 50, 60 minutes with them at a time, sometimes multiple times a week. And that would give me the opportunity to get to know people. And there's something really nice about the work that we do as physios and as personal trainers, in that we get to just spend time with people and become an ally of theirs, and not just this third party or this specialist on the outside, but we get a look on the inside as well. And I thought there was something really special about that. As you mentioned, it's a tough program to get into. I was throwing applications left, right, and center. I'm very fortunate that I got into the excellent program that I did. I ended up traveling over to Melbourne, Australia to study, where I was enamored by their focus and passion for sport countrywide there. It was amazing to see how active they were as people. Every weekend was spent in the park kicking a soccer ball or throwing a frisbee, whatever it was. I learned a lot of important lessons there, gained a lot of important life experience too, leaving home and living on my own for a little while. And I guess there wasn't this specific moment or catalyst to my story in becoming a physio, but it was a combination of these different elements that just, it felt right. It wasn't something that I had to think a whole lot about. I would say more of the thinking that I've done was post-graduation, what type of physio do I want to be? And that is where I would say the more interesting part of the story begins, and I'm sure we can chat a little bit about that today when we talk about like what is physiotherapy, but that's a bit about my story.
So what is a physiotherapist?
Aha, good question.
Yeah.
So physiotherapy, I would define it as this branch of healthcare that is most commonly known for helping people deal with injuries related to fitness, sports, or even just kind of typical at-home tasks. What a lot of people don't realize is there are two other main streams of physiotherapy as well, and this was something that I only realized once I studied physio in school, and there is something called cardiorespiratory physio, and there's also neurological-based physio. Cardiorespiratory physio, it's as simple as someone has had open heart surgery, they are learning how to breathe again, they are waking up from having been in a pretty deep sleep for a number of hours and having gone through something super traumatic, and you are the person that is helping them manage their pain. You're someone who's helping them managing, getting back on their feet, taking their first steps, and ultimately getting back to walking, running, or whatever it was that they were doing before. Neurological physio, imagine someone who has Parkinson's and you're helping them exercise in order to maintain their fitness while movement is something that could be quite challenging for them. Or if someone has had a stroke, you can help them regain some strength and some mobility. So there are some really interesting areas of physiotherapy, but coming back to what my passions were, and those were sport. My physiotherapy, the way that I've practiced, has been focused more so on your kind of everyday athletes, your average Joes, your average Janes, people who may hurt themselves playing a sport or exercising or bending over at home and just feeling something a little bit uncomfortable in their back or in their leg. And what physiotherapy ultimately is, it's helping people recognize where they are in terms of what their injury allows them to tolerate. So they have some sort of a pain. Sure, they may not be able to run as fast as they could yesterday, but maybe they can walk right now. You've identified that starting point, that entry point, and then my role as a physiotherapist is to take that person from that entry point, build them up slowly, gradually, and appropriately until they can get back to the thing that they love doing.
Would you say that you focus mostly on musculoskeletal, and then any type of, because you have to still study cardiorespiratory, you still need to have the neuro aspect. So you do have some tools in your tool belt. Maybe they're not used as in demand as the musculoskeletal aspect, but do you find that your day-to-day is much more that, being musculoskeletal? And then anytime you could take a tool, because, you don't need to, whenever you cover cardiorespiratory and it's like, okay, someone just had, a heart attack, or they just went for a bypass, not just a bypass, but they went for a bypass and they come out and they're in a hospital for let's say 4 days, and they're really tight in their chest and they're scared of every pain they feel. And you're like, okay, let's talk about, your pulmonary system in your heart and what's working. But all that in-depth detail you could use for a healthy individual playing soccer or hockey or whatever, or somebody who's like, I get out of breath when I go up the stairs. And you're like, all right, let's do some tests first and foremost, make sure everything, because I don't want to false diagnose you, because you're also, as a physiotherapist, correct me if I'm wrong, but you have the ability to diagnose. So I would imagine, correct me if I'm wrong, that in your field, dealing with a lot of sports, it's first and foremost musculoskeletal, and then you use those tools that you learn in school if they come in handy, because it doesn't have to be a super intense in the like situation where, for example, neurological, you know, I had the benefit and privilege to work to volunteer with a center here in Montreal called the Cumming Center, and I volunteered because it was needed for my resume, and then I just stayed on because I was like, this makes me feel good, selfishly, you know. I was so nervous to treat somebody inappropriately. Like I was like, someone comes in and they have Parkinson's or they have multiple sclerosis, and I'm like, I don't want to be like, hey, are you okay? Like they're okay, like chill. Like I don't know, I don't have any background. I don't want to like baby them. I just don't know how to go about somebody with an issue. So when I was speaking with a phenomenal leader there, and she's like, what do you want to get out of this? I'm like, be comfortable. Like I don't know why I like brace myself. And then you get with them and I'm like, oh, this is awesome. You're just like, what are you doing? You know,
People are so resilient.
They're great.
Right? We convince ourselves that, especially based on diagnoses, that people are fragile. And I should say, of course, there is a time and place where someone does need to be babied, coddled, whatever the term is, right?
Yeah.
But more often than not, especially in musculoskeletal, but in many populations, in many conditions, people are so resilient. They are so much stronger than we give them credit for. And that can kind of tie into the trickiness that surrounds diagnoses, right? And when a patient comes into a musculoskeletal focused clinic, and to answer your question, my practice was 99.99% musculoskeletal, right? It was muscles, bones, tendons, ligaments, the things that typically get hurt while playing a sport or in the gym, for example. So often people label themselves with these diagnoses that they've either been given in the past, that they found online the day before, and for whatever reason trusted some forum filled with spelling mistakes and whatnot. And it creates a sense of self-fragility. This, I'm injured and this person or this website told me that I have this condition and that you should avoid this list of 1,000 things. And your role as a physiotherapist then becomes less, okay, let's find that entry point and start pushing this person, and more kind of talking to this person to calm them down, to help them realize that they are so much stronger and so much more resilient than they give themselves credit for. And that's where the psychology element of physiotherapy comes in, and the coaching element and the personalization element. And what I love so much about physiotherapy is that no two people with the same two injuries are going to need the same trajectory in terms of treatment. Physically, I would say what they're going to accomplish over the 8 to 12 to 20 weeks is similar, but the ways in which we accomplish that, the pace at which we accomplish that, the way that we get them to trust their bodies, that's where there are so many differences between people. And coming back to my raison d'etre, like the why I do this, it's getting to work with different people who are going through different things, who are going to be more or less receptive to what I have to say. It challenges me to figure out how to get through to people, because not all people respond to the same cues, the same words, the same type of raw motivation. And it just makes for a really exciting career path.
Yeah.
And I see personal training in a very similar light. People come in mostly for people either want to, from my experience, lose weight or build muscle. What most people kind of want is some sort of body transformation or body composition change. They just see it in different lights based on the magazines that they read or the influencers that they follow. To help people do that, the recipe is rather simple, right? And we're filled with this knowledge of biology and physiology and anatomy, and we want to tell everyone everything.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, like 90% of it is the same for everyone, but it's how you communicate that to them. It's how you get them to buy into the system, knowing that it's lifestyle changes that lead to this and not a 16-week intensive program that is going to change their life. And so that communication piece is so important. I went on a bit of a tangent there, but to come back to your question, it's 99% musculoskeletal, what we do in clinic. Do we integrate cardiorespiratory and neurological elements? For sure. That basis of understanding of those two kind of fields is super important. honestly speaking, I'm not really going too in depth in either of them. But as a physiotherapist who is relied upon to be able to diagnose someone and set them on the correct path of treatment, you do need to be able to have that background knowledge in order to make the right decisions, appropriate decisions, and to help people maximize their results.
If you take an athlete and you start focusing on, how do you pronounce this? Proprioception. I guess that's kind of neurological, right?
Totally.
So like in these, that's what I mean. Like you don't have to, like my experience when I was training, guiding, helping, when I was doing over at the Cummings Center, you know, we could have somebody, let's say Parkinson's. You know, we want to, it's for those who don't know, I'm going to dumb it down as simple as possible, but it's like a disease that has to do very intensely with dopamine, right? And because they're not having that secretion, we really want to like kind of like ramp them up and have fun and like, let's get this going, punch, 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 move, move, move. And like that could be beneficial from what I was told and what I was doing. But then when you know, and you're getting them to move, and then with multiple sclerosis, it's not that similar. Well, the disease is not similar at all, but the way we would move them, sometimes they would be combined in one. They would be combined in one class because sometimes it could be beneficial. Now I digress because what I'm trying to say is when you have something like proprioception and you're taking, let's say, a baseball player, and you toss the ball and you want him to like maintain eye contact, but be able to reach out and know where his limbs end. Or like a young athlete who's going through a growth spurt and he's really good before his growth spurt. And now he's like, oh, where's my arms finish? Especially hockey. These little lanky kids are like, I was once good. Now I'm 5'10". And so I could see how that was really where it was crossing over. And I really want to say something because it's like my head's going in tangents. We said before, people in this field, the gift of tangents. But before I talk about that, if you had to say somebody's listening and they have a very common thing I deal with, I know you probably deal with everything, but what would be the common, I almost feel like I could guess this, but like what would be the most common thing that someone will come to you for? And what's something that you could tell somebody to like, don't stress out? Like, you know, I mean, we could say herniated disc. I went to the osteopath. Well, no, I had an osteopath in an interview and we talked about like slip disc. Like, come on, call it something else. Because people are like, I have a slip disc? Oh my God, it slipped. Where did it slip?
How?
Is it in my hair? They'll have to realign it and push it back in. And it's like, let's say like your disc is having a challenge and we're going to get over it, you know? But people herniated, like, oh, it's bubbling out. And like you're like, am I close to paralyzed? You're like, not at all. You probably have a bunch of them that you don't know about. Now I digress once again because trying to stay on topic here. What's the most common one? What is like the most common, like someone comes in, you're like, I know what to do.
Yeah. So I hope you weren't looking for too much variety here.
No.
What I most commonly saw was back pain.
Of course.
I have a very tough time.
You see how I slipped that disc in there?
Right? I have a very tough time with back pain related diagnoses. The research, as far as musculoskeletal related injuries and pain goes, there is no type of pain that has had more research conducted on it throughout the course of humanity. It is one of the most expensive injuries for the healthcare system. It costs us so much more than we realize in taxpayers' money, both the treatment of it and the kind of the effects of back pain on the economy, right? When someone is hurt, when someone isn't able to perform their job, that has a downstream impact on the productivity of our economy, right? If I were to guess why back pain is the thing that you see the most amount of people for, It's really interesting. On a podcast a number of years ago, there's a he's actually not a physiotherapist, he's a chiropractor located in the United States. His name is Dr. Jacob Hardin. And I had the pleasure of meeting him, and I hope he's listening to this. He's probably not, but maybe he is. He and I have kind of kept in touch over the years. He came to Montreal to teach a course a number of years ago. And I had the pleasure of going out for dinner with him and with another coach in Montreal, Rich Thaw, who you may know. And I asked Jacob, we were having a very philosophical conversation. And I asked him, I said, okay, we know that pain is this thing that everyone is going to encounter at some point in their lives. Musculoskeletal pain, I'm sure, I don't know what the statistic is, upwards of 80-90% of people are going to encounter something at some point in their lives. Not everyone is going to go and seek help for it, right? I said, what is the thing or the reason or the trigger why someone makes the decision to go and seek help for something, right? Because we've all woken up with a sore neck, a sore back, a sore this, a sore that, and not even an ounce of us thought about going to get help for it because there's something in our minds that said, well, I've had this before. I know I'm going to get over it if I just avoid this or that or wait 2 days, right? He said, all right, there's something as simple as a paper cut. No one's going to go to the hospital or to a physiotherapist or to a chiro because they've had a paper cut. Why? They trust that it's going to get better. It's probably happened a dozen times before to them, and it probably doesn't impact them from being able to do anything that they love. He says, what if that paper cut gets bigger? What if that paper cut gets to a point where they haven't encountered it before, they're not sure if it's going to get better, or it's impacting them from doing something that they love? That is often the catalyst or the trigger. That third piece there, if what I'm going through is something that is limiting me from being able to do the things that I love, that is often when someone goes and seeks help for something. And so when it comes to back pain, I think there's a reason why it's so common in clinics is maybe not necessarily because it happens in more people, but because it's this thing that limits people so much, and therefore they present to clinics more frequently. I don't have a statistic to back that up. It's just kind of a theory of mine. Like, why don't we see more like toe pain patients in clinic? Because it just doesn't really bother people. Millions of people out there could be having toe pain right now, but because it's so unimpactful for them, they're not going to present in clinic. Probably a silly comparison, but I do think there's something to be said about the uncertainty around back pain and the limiting nature of it that leads people to come into clinics.
Yeah.
What then compounds on that is the amount of information that is out there on back pain, more often than not, that is based on things that probably aren't so accurate or true.
Yeah.
And that information can come from the internet. It can come from my buddy's brother's sister's roommate who had back pain once and passed on some message to me. It can come from stuff we read in magazines. It can come from stuff we hear on the radio, the cool gadgets that we'll see at Costco that say, eliminate 99% of back pain overnight. All of this stuff, this information and often misinformation, contributes to actually making back pain like this really lucrative market.
Yeah.
Because everyone has a solution for it. And what this does is it gets people to, I think, see this pain as something so much bigger than it is, not to discount it, not to say that it isn't impacting someone, but they might see it as something so much bigger, so much more mystical, something that needs so much more attention to get over, when in reality, it's something like 95% of back pain typically resolves on its own. And there's a tiny fraction of back pain where there is actually some sort of an actual medical emergency related to a potential paralysis or sometimes a tumor in the spine that could be cancerous. But that affects, I think it's 1 to 5% of people who actually have back pain.
Right.
So 95%, you can diagnose them with something that is quite controversial in the industry, but people refer to as non-specific low back pain. And it's essentially this idea that there isn't something that we specifically know to be causing this pain. There may be a herniated disc, but it may have been there for the last 30 years. Why is it only bothering you now? Maybe it isn't actually that disc that's bothering you now. And maybe you just worked out in the gym a little bit harder than you usually do.
Yeah.
And then it was when you came home to untie your shoe, that extra little bit of bending was something that set off your back.
Yeah.
The same way that extra little kind of degree in your neck when you're sleeping set off your neck one morning when you woke up.
Yeah. That's it's a loaded question, but I mean, you can see I've been in this field for a minute or two, because like, I mean, I definitely, leading with that, like, for example, back pain, and everything you're saying, I keep on thinking it's going to be the second time in like the second video in the second week. Like, this guy's just getting dropped all the time. And, he's a teacher that I was emailing yesterday. I'm going to be interviewing him later on as well. His name is Dr. Wasnowski, and he taught a class to me at Concordia in pain management. Mm-hmm. He is currently a physiotherapist with a doctorate in the field. He's I think the head chair of the Pain Association in Montreal. Like, he just has, like, it was such a good class. Now, I bring him up now because there's so much that this course that I took, and then the education I continue with, it has been so amazing from the physiology point of it, which was once my worst class and then became my absolute passion and like my love. But then there was this class, pain management, and I wasn't even supposed to take it. I put it in my cart. I forgot about it, my cart online there too, and then I forgot about it. And then when it came to school, I was like, I don't even need this class. And then I thought, like, okay, but I don't want it to hurt my GPA. And then I was like, you know what? I'm going to go and I'm going to sit in a couple classes. I'm going to see how it is. And within the second or third class, I'm like, man, this class is heck. Like, it's physiology is like, they bullied me to learn, but I was happy. And I was like, wow, this is cool. Anti-inflammatory cytokines, inflammatory cytokines. I'm like, cool. Like, you learn about pathways and mechanisms, and you're like, this is so cool, but you need to learn it. And in this class, I just sat there. Now, I digress, because what I want to say is everything you're saying, this man talks about in these unique ways that, one, I was happy because I was like, okay, it seems like I embody this. I just didn't know the terminology. But he talks very often about therapeutic alliance. I spoke about this, not in too much detail, but with the osteo interview I just did. And I spoke about how, man, two people, Jess and Alfred, two physiotherapists. Alfred's not a real person, just so you know. And if you're out there, I'm sorry, Alfred. but you take two people and you're both doing the same thing. But Alfred had a bad day and he meets a client for the first time. He comes in and he sees the client and he says things in a certain way, but he has all the same tools as you. In fact, he's doing the same thing as you. Then you have Jess, and he knows how to speak. The Irish say he's got the gift of the gab. He knows how to talk. He says that, but he's not only the approach is not only there, but you're reassuring them that everything's going to be all right. And you take those terms that we're scientifically throwing around, hurting people. You go on Reddit. Yeah, the bulge, the slip disc, you go to the chiropractor, they put it back in. What happened to the disc? Where did it go? Why does it have to be put back in? Nothing to say. I mean, I have a chiropractor. He's awesome. But just saying that sometimes people go like, is that what I need? Do I need surgery intervention? What's happening? When it comes down to this therapeutic alliance where Jess sat down with the client and he was like, listen, sometimes X, Y, and Z happens, and you walk through it with them, and all of a sudden you build that therapeutic alliance, which allows you to get these results that are actually miraculous. Not to throw that word around, but if you have somebody with low back issues and you start to do some like bridges with them, you reinforce glutes and hamstrings, you work on the abs, and you just kind of like, and that's simple. That's simple, but you're really helping them out, range of motion. And they feel like they could trust you, but then you also say, how have you been sleeping? Oh, it hurts. No, but like, have you been sleeping often? How's your coffee intake? How's work? How's your relationship? And you start to realize that this individual might have some other things going on, which is the reason why this back issue that you had mentioned for 30 years, today was the day. And it could be these external sources that will definitely have an effect on inflammatory cytokines or the overall threshold, a pain threshold, right? So all of a sudden their threshold is decreasing because they have a normal plate, but things are getting heavier and heavier, and they just can't deal with a slipped disc that they had for 30 years. So I think it's a phenomenal thing that you just mentioned that, because it really I'm happy that you're sitting here and talking the way you're talking, and that I don't have to get into like a cordial, what's the proper word? A politeful argument. But like, I love it. I love your way. I think it's fantastic. And if we could branch off of this unique way of thinking, when it comes to physio, when it comes to osteopathy, when it comes to all these fields, I always think that everyone needs to start to think about them in a preventative manner. Like, you don't need to go see a physio because you're hurt. I don't think that. I think people, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I think a physio could be used on your best of days, and most likely will continue those days to be the best of days. Do you see this in your field as a struggle when it comes to preventative care? Do you see it something where you're very fortunate, where people, you have that therapeutic alliance, so they understand that it's like, hey, we often use a term like a tune-up. Come and see me every other week. Come and see me once a month. You know, or they have such an alliance with you where they're like, you know what, can I just come and see you like reoccurring, like once a month, once a week, once every 2 weeks, whatever that may be. And they know that your fine tuning will just help them. But really, at the end of the day, it's like you're the thing that kind of removes some stuff from the plate. You know, they get to vent. They get to feel that they're in good hands. And yeah, so tell me about preventative care. Does this exist in physiotherapy?
So this is one of the things that I've kind of gone back and forth on over the years, and this kind of ties into the short conversation we had before we came on here, talking about the business side of what we do, right? And we can kind of dive into that a little bit more in a bit. As far as preventative care goes, I'm personally not convinced that the idea of physical tune-ups is really warranted, because that then kind of ties into this idea that we are, for lack of a better term, like mechanics of the human body. And I think if we are to give credit to the human body for being as resilient as it is, and as asymmetrical and imperfect as it is, and humans being so complex, and the experience of pain being one that is affected by so many different factors, I think it's difficult for us to say that we are helping prevent someone's injury by physically tuning them up. But something that you alluded to in your question was more so on the psychological side of these visits, right? And again, tying into that therapeutic alliance, which that is probably my favorite phrase or expression when it comes to healthcare, because in an alliance, it's not a coach and a player or a mentor and a mentee, but it's two people working together. And physiotherapy and rehab in general, osteo, chiro, AT, whatever it is, the two people have to be working together. The rehab professional can only help the person as much as they want to be helped, and they can only act on as much information as they're given, right? Of course, it's on the professional to be able to ask the right questions, to seek the right information, because someone may not know that they need to share something, but that is the art and the beauty of the alliance. I do believe that recurring visits have a place in rehabilitation, in the physiotherapy model in particular. I think helping people identify things that are going on in their lives, mostly as it relates to their physical happenings, right? Because it becomes a bit of a slippery slope if I tell you, hey, you should come see me once a month so we can talk about the things that are stressing you out in life. I'm not sure that that's my place to tell you to come and specifically see that for me, which is different from if we see each other and it happens to come up in conversation, then I think it's warranted for us to talk about that. But where I do think recurring visits with physios or other health professionals can be helpful is specifically in cases where someone is relatively active, someone is balancing perhaps stressful work and life situation with relatively high intensity or moderate intensity physical activity. Because as we know, this, call it stress battery, or this threshold that our bodies have to take on stress, both physical, psychological, work-related, friends-related, family-related, relationship-related, all these different types of stresses exist in our lives. The threshold is something that can easily be surpassed when we combine all these different types of stresses. If you surpass this hypothetical threshold, are you definitely going to get hurt? No, not necessarily. But in this model, we believe that at times where this threshold is being exceeded, you are maybe more susceptible to some sort of injury or discomfort, what have you. So these weekly or monthly or semi-annually visits can be a great way for a client to have someone take a look at their training program, or to have someone take a look at their last 2 months of training to see what the relative intensity has been like, to see if they've been consistent or consistently building up their intensity in a way that their body is more likely to handle it, or if unknowingly they've been going through extreme phases of tons of activity one week, no activity the next week, but for whatever reason this didn't register with them. And I think if there's one area where a physiotherapist who's well versed when it comes to exercise can truly help, it's in helping people manage these training loads in accordance with what they tell us about their life-related loads, being the different stresses that they encounter on a day-to-day basis. Because so much of, or one of the ways that physios can help people when they come in for specific injuries is by helping them identify perhaps that they've been pushing themselves a lot harder than they are used to over the last 2 weeks, which may have led to this acute spike in pain. Or this person who ran a marathon last summer who took 6 months off decided to go out for their first run of this summer and tried to beat their distance and pace from the last one. And just did a little too much too soon, or too little for too long. Right? Those are two really kind of catch-all phrases when it comes to most injuries. If you do too much too soon, if you do something that creates a huge spike in your training stress, you are maybe more susceptible to injury. Or if you do too little for too long and then try and jump back into things, your body may not respond positively to it. So I think these recurring visits, to your question, are a great way to help people avoid the too much too soon or the too little for too long, and to just keep people on a nice steady path rather than trying to tune them up, because then we're starting to get into the slippery slope where we believe that we can correctly identify things going on the inside, which research shows we're really bad at actually identifying these things reliably. And second, we believe that our hands can then actually fix these things that may or may not be broken. So if it works for some people, we see it in professional athletes, these rituals around their multi-hour pregame warm-ups where they need to do certain things to feel good. That's because they've built this up over time. These are the 0.1% of society who, you know what, frankly, if they need to foam roll for 45 minutes before a game so they can go and win a Stanley Cup in Game 7, I ain't going to be the one to tell them to stop.
If it's not broken,
don't fix it. If it ain't broken, don't fix it. And rituals are important. And rituals and people's perceptions and the things that happen to us in life and the experiences we've had all ties into that psychological side of physio that then comes back into that therapeutic alliance, which then you sprinkle in the physical nature of the human body, the physiology, the anatomy, the training component, and now you've got this complex human, this complex puzzle in front of you, and that's why Jess and Alfred can do the same thing with the same person and get two different results. Neither was wrong, but maybe one got through and one didn't.
Poor Alfred. So
poor Alfred, poor guy.
So when we look at this, one thing that my head, because you're talking and then my head's going like, that's right. And I'm thinking of terms and I'm linking that in. And I think you know what? The tune-up might be like something that seems familiar for me, where okay, someone might come in, or let's say someone has a big game and I'll prime their muscles, and I'll prime them, and I'll prime them in a way where they're they come in and we do let's say 30%. whatever that means, on tension, in movements, and I prime them. Like the bow and arrow gets cocked back. And I'm like, oh, you're ready. You're going to go there with just like just the right amount of tension for his body because he's a little off. So I have little, I guess, phrases that I kind of shoot out there. But what I'm hearing from you is often in this field, and I think in your field, physiotherapist, in physiotherapy, especially the type of person it seems that you are, it seems we could all use a translator of the body because we don't understand how our body deals with physiological adaptations. And we don't understand that I took 6 months off a marathon that I did 4 hours, 4 hour marathon, right? Like that's like a really good weekend warrior. Like somebody who's been running a lot and they got it in, but like it's like they feel good. And they take 6 months off and they're like, you know what? I know this is how I had to train. I'm going to come back. I'm just going to kick ass. And he doesn't realize, well, like technically you're a beginner. You took 6 months off. And I'm just saying technically to be nice. You're a beginner. And you need to address that. And when it comes to your physiological adaptations, like your first, let's say 3 weeks, really like a month and a half, but like your first like 3 weeks, just, get into some movements again, just get into movements. And not to get into how to do this, but it sounds to me, the beautiful thing, because a lot of people don't understand physiological adaptations. They don't understand regression and progression. They don't understand like the detraining or whatever. But if we did understand that, there's so many things that could be done. And I think that instead of, when it comes to preventative care in physiotherapy, maybe that's a massive tool, the communication. Because at the end of the day, if you have, and I'm sure you have, because we all have those clients that it's a routine. It's their routine. Like, that's it. Now, without getting too much on a tangent, I'll come back and I want to ask you this. How often do you wear your personal training hat? And do you find that you wear one hat on top of the other? Like, because you have a foundation, you did your thing in the gym, you're still kind of probably in the gym, find yourself in the gym. How often do you find, or is that just that's kind of what you, I don't want to say identify as, but I would feel that if I was an osteopath or a physiotherapist or a chiropractor or whatever, I would always be a personal trainer. I would be like, let's get you off the table now, and I'm going to show you some movements. So coming back to the question, do you wear both hats?
If you ask me, it's one hat.
It's one hat.
It's one hat, and depending on the person and what that person is going through and where they are, where their entry point is, I'll bring that term back. How do you draw the line between rehab and rehab and personal training? There is no line. It exists on a spectrum.
Yeah.
And I haven't practiced in about a year and a half. I keep up with research, and I'm still following all the same kind of people online and reading all the blogs and doing all that. But if I can come back to a model that I used to use with patients, and I would use this model with patients both in the gym and in the clinic. And I was very fortunate that the clinic that I had was separated by a gym by just one door. So we were in and out of the clinic multiple times in a session, created a really nice flow. It did a lot of great things for people, most specifically psychologically. It helped them realize that if their injury that was so bad to them didn't stop them from training in the same gym where people were squatting 225 pounds and doing sprints on the treadmill, and they were operating in the same place, they realize, hey, you know what, maybe I'm not as broken as I thought I was, right? So there was a psychological piece of that. But which hat was I wearing? They're the same hat, and I'll tell you why. This model I used to use, I would take out a whiteboard and I would draw a straight line. And I would say on one end of this line is the simplest, easiest thing that someone could physically do. And I said, that's probably the most leisurely activity. It's probably walking your dog, right? Like that's kind of fundamental stuff when someone is kind of physically able to walk and do those types of things. And I said, if we look at the other end of the spectrum, what is the toughest thing someone could possibly do? I don't know, squat 1,000 pounds, right? And I said, this person in front of me who perhaps had a knee injury or a back injury, I said, would you agree that what you are physically able to do right now probably lies somewhere between these two ends of the spectrum, right? And if we simplify it, instead of walking the dog, we could say like standing up from a chair, let's say. They're like, yeah, I am somewhere on this spectrum. I'm like, awesome. That means that we have so much room for progression, because I don't think that you're anywhere near squatting 1,000 pounds right now. And so when it comes to, are we doing rehab? Are we doing exercise? Well, if I can use the same kind of mental model with someone who's dealing with an injury or someone who's come into the gym for their first workout, the idea is the same. We all lie somewhere on this spectrum, and what our bodies can tolerate is simply just a point on that spectrum. And the only way to move in the right direction along that line is to put.
All right. So because everything works out exactly the way it's supposed to work out, my phone decided to stop filming. So for the next 20-ish minutes, you'll have the privilege of looking at Jess opposed to me. And yeah, sorry about that technical little mix-up. Please enjoy the rest of this interview. Take care. Bye-bye.
The only way to move in the right direction along that line is to push ourselves enough to create some sort of adaptation, but to not push ourselves too much that we can't recover from it. How do you know what someone can or can't recover from? There's some intuition built into that, but there's also a little bit of common sense. If I've got someone who hasn't exercised in 6 months come into the gym, I'm not necessarily going to push them to failure on most exercises. I'm not going to get them to a point where they can barely walk out of the gym. That's not conducive to much. Sure, it'll create some sort of an adaptation, but the expense is so much greater than the benefit, right? But if this person, rather than their issue having been 6 months of inactivity, is rather someone who had an injury, I'm certainly going to push them even less, because the thing that they've come in for, call it a knee injury, is probably rather sensitive, and so I need to be even more conservative with it. But at the same time, those two people, I'm simply just trying to move them down this line towards maybe one day squatting 1,000 pounds, or in the case of the marathon runner, run another marathon in sub 4 hours. Or the person whose goal is to be able to pick up their grandkid from the ground. These are the types of things that people are working towards. Rehab and physio are operating on the same spectrum. It's the intensity and the focus with which we do this that makes the difference. So is an exercise a physio exercise versus a gym exercise? You can't prove to me that it is. It all depends on the person and what they're going through, what they hope to achieve, and how much their body can tolerate right here, right now.
Right. And also the individual prescribing the movement and exercise, right? Because let's say you go into a gym and you have somebody on all fours, and then they're like, the leg sways out, and they come back and the leg sways out. Or they do something that looks kind of complex to a trainer, just kind of like watching what's happening. And then he's like, that looks cool. And then he tries to add variety to his stuff, but he doesn't understand that like there was a reason why you were doing that. So I think that like everything that you said, it's like it could fit in both worlds for you, which was my question, which hat. And for you, it's just like sometimes the beak is forward and sometimes it's backwards.
So I'll just add to my answer a little bit. Again, you can have two people with the same injury, and there is no difference, where the difference between rehab and fitness are really just the dosage and the intensity and the things that I mentioned.
Mm-hmm.
But also meeting that person where they are, right? And you could have someone who comes in with a pretty simple knee injury, something that doesn't seem to be too flared up, something that isn't really that irritable, but psychologically, this thing is eating them inside. They can't think about anything other than their knee pain, even though I'm sure this person could tolerate like an unsupported body weight squat.
Mm-hmm.
There could be something psychological that bringing them into the gym near the person squatting 225 pounds might actually set them off and might make them worry too much. And despite their knee being able to tolerate what I'm about to ask them to do, their mind doesn't want to tolerate it. And that person, I know, needs to stay in the physio clinic, away from the noise, away from the loud rap music or whatever's playing in there, away from all those things that from a sensory perspective could make them feel a little bit uneasy. And I'm rather going to use the squat rack that I set up in the physio clinic where no one is watching, where no one is around, because this person just needs to see a little bit more slowly, okay, I'm stronger than I thought, but I'm not really ready to be on that side
Yeah.
of the shop,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And so there's tolerance
Mm-hmm.
that's physical, but there's also more psychological tolerance.
So, do you find that your background has really assisted you in, I want to say client retention, but what I mean is, as from a business standpoint, if someone was a physio and not a personal trainer, it might be in their best worthwhile to go get themselves a little certification just to allow them to have a better understanding, because just because we could test muscles and because we could, do certain movements on a table, it does not necessarily mean that they could carry it over into the gym. But then on top of that, there are movements you have to invent. You just have to invent. And you have to be so creative with an individual who they're doing lunges, let's say, and their knees coming in. And then you're like, okay, I think it's not that there's maybe a weakness. Maybe there's too much strength that's pulling in. So let's go maybe to the pulleys, wrap a little thing around there, go into some static squats. Like, just play with things that you weren't taught, because you have one hat that is a trainer and a physio, which almost makes me, one of my last kind of thoughts here was, I have a question that is, it's tough to ask, because it's, where do you see the future of physio? And when I ask this question, understanding how loaded it could be, I think often if somebody asked me, like, where's the future of any health and wellness industry? When I think of the future, I think more professionals, my point of view is more professionals could start to embody not only therapeutic alliance, because sometimes people are just going, it's a client. That's it. It's just a client. They're coming in and that's it. And it's like, you listen, man, just love it. Love what you're doing. Because just that alone could really build that alliance. But the tools you have in your tool belt are not a unique physiotherapist that is graduating from university in a master's of physiotherapy. It's very unique, which has led you to your path. But it's also the same unique, and we're not going into that. But it's also that you're about to finish your MBA. You have a very unique skill set as an individual with an MBA, personal trainer, physiotherapist, all one hat that they just stay on. So that's a loaded question. But where do you think you would like to see physiotherapy? Not for yourself, because you're head of the game. Where would you like to see physiotherapy make some adjustments? And maybe that's going into the future, or just like, I'd like to see this more. In short, like, what do you think? What's on your mind?
First, I hope my wife listens to this. These compliments are nice to hear. That's a really good question. And I have this conversation quite often. As I mentioned, I'm still very much involved in the physiotherapy space, the community. There are a bunch of physios that, our conversations can be as simple as sending memes back and forth to each other, or workout videos, or whatever it is, discovering new influencers. But in any case, there is this existential question that we ask, like, what is the future of physio, right? And the root of this existential question is physiotherapy 5-10 years ago, in some cases even still now, is very much this thing that people see as more is better. The more sessions I have, the quicker I'm going to get better. Or as a clinician, the more I can bring people in, the more I can help them. When in reality, the biggest limiting factor that we as physios sometimes don't like to admit is that we are governed by the rules of physiology and anatomy and biology and the human body, and there is only so much we can do to help people get better. From a business perspective, this is really crappy to hear, because physios make money by seeing patients. The more patients you see, the more money you make, the more promotions you get, the more likely you are to do whatever it is that you want to do, right? And so some of the more philosophical or existential kind of physios are out there saying everything incentivizes us to see patients more, right? To make them feel like they need us more than they probably do. Is there a way that we can create a model that doesn't incentivize us for seeing people more, but incentivizes outcomes? What is an outcome? An outcome could be someone getting back to their sport, or their pain dropping from a 9 on 10 to a 7 on 10. Something that actually changes something in someone's life. How can we incentivize that so that physios don't have to feel this need to see a patient for one session and then go and book them 3 times a week for the next 4 weeks if it's not going to add a ton of value? Physio, like any other business, is a business, and the more you can get someone to buy of it, the better. If I go to a restaurant and I'm ordering too much food, a waiter is highly unlikely to tell me, whoa, you've ordered too much. Rather, they're going to say, that's probably enough. You can order some more if you want, right? So how do we draw the line between the ethics of this and when is it right, or when should we tell someone to do less or to come and see me less? It's very, very, very shaky. As someone who kind of prides myself on my ethics and on my honesty, this is something that I struggled with a lot as a physio. How can I make a living? How can I be successful, run a successful operation, while also not selling someone something that they don't necessarily need? And that could be an extra session, or whatever it may be. So we've gone from this 5-10 years ago model of 3 times a week for a month for any injury, and that's just what it was, to this new kind of age of physios who are like, yeah, I'm going to see someone once and I'll set them off into the wild and they should be good, right? Because everything kind of gets better on its own and they'll be fine. The answer lies somewhere in between, right? That's kind of my take nowadays. The answer is I need to give this person as much time and attention as they need. I know that this thing is going to get better. There's something called natural history, or the natural progression of injuries. Most things do get better on their own as long as you stop kind of pissing it off by doing the same things over and over again. Knowing that, can I honestly and ethically still see this person on a weekly or bi-weekly basis until they're better? And I would say 2 years ago, I would have said no. If they're going to get better, I have no business doing that. Nowadays, I would say 110% I should continue to see this person if it is going to add value to their experience.
Yeah.
What is value? Value is not just getting better. Value is the things along the way, the tailoring of their exercise program, the live feedback to what they're doing, the reassurance along the way that things are progressing well, but they woke up a little bit uneasy or stiff today. That's okay. It's all part of it. Could be catching someone who's not necessarily following the plan. They've been pushing themselves too much or not pushing themselves enough. So while we think when we see someone for this first session and we give them this beautiful laminated 4-week program, and it could be on an app, it could be on a website, we could text them through the app, whatever it is, do we know if this person's sticking to the plan at all? Are they pushing too much? Are they pushing too little? I'm not sure. And the best way to be able to kind of reinforce what we deliver to them in terms of education and treatment in the first session is the chance to see them again and connect with them again. Could be in person, could be remote. It might not matter, but the point that I'm making is the future of physio is not so different from what it is now, but it's a function of us getting better as practitioners in identifying how much does this person need me? How can I be of most value to them? While it goes against my ethics to see someone too frequently, if they tell me, hey, I know I don't need it, but I really want to see you again, that's not unethical of me. That's
Right.
me doing the thing that I set out to do at the start of my career
Right.
10 years ago, and that's helping people.
Right.
And so dissociating this thing between helping good, money bad, and figuring out like where we lie on this spectrum, it's not really a spectrum. It's doing the right thing for people to be able to help them at the best of our abilities. Aside from that, I do believe that physios are in a very have a responsibility to keep up with the latest research and to not just spout the things that they heard in clinic 10 years ago or that they read on the internet yesterday. We do have a duty to our patients. We have a duty to the orders that we are members of, whatever it may be, in order to practice up to date with the clinical practice guidelines that exist. But aside from that, I think the future of physio is just how can we create a better patient experience? How can we leverage technology? How can we leverage the spaces that we're in, whether it be with the colors on the wall or the feel or the smell when someone walks into a clinic? You know, if you think about a hotel, if you think about hospitality, you're never going to walk into a restaurant, for example, and it smells like manure in the entrance, right?
Right. There's the whole package.
There's a whole package, right?
Yeah.
If you walk into a beautiful French cuisine place, you're not going to have hardcore rock music playing in the lobby. You're going to have that elevator type music, right?
Of course.
So if we think about the experiences that people create in hospitality, I think the future of physiotherapy is figuring out how can we create a better patient experience that isn't just a room with a bed and, you know, a blank ceiling to stare up at, but something that is just going to make people feel good. What does that look like? Depends on the clientele, depends on the physio, depends on a whole slew of factors. But I don't actually think the future of physio is so different from what it is now, other than people just kind of keeping up with
Here's what I found.
Siri wants to get
she
in
wants
on
to
it.
get into it. Let's get a third person.
But the future, we're living the future now. It's just how can we use the technologies and the things around us, the old school brick and mortar, to create a better patient experience that makes people feel good.
The way I look at when I see different industries, if I could add to that, is that when I went back to school, which I'm just a moment away from being 40. So when I went back to school, I was older, not old. I was at the top of my career, the top. And this decision wasn't taken lightly. I had a lot of people, specific people motivating me. But I bring this up because I decided to go back because I wanted to help more. And I'm in an industry right now where this is my industry. It belongs to me in my world. And it belongs to somebody else in their world. That's okay. And I think that I need to help people in the best way possible. So you said you didn't have two different hats. You had one hat. It just so happens it's like one of those big, tall hats that you can keep shoving things in there, little notes. And for me, I look at it and I think to myself, this is my industry. And I'm here to make a dent on it. Not financially, not successfully in that sense, but I want to help as many people as possible. That's what I want to do. I want people living longer, not existing longer. I want them to just feel good. 70-year-old grandpa just kicking it, doing great. I want it all. And I look at physiotherapy and I look at the future of it. And I think the future of that and the future of all these different industries, I look at it and I say to myself, how many people, including doctors, including personal trainers, including everything, how many people refuse to be humble and try to learn more? Try to find out how wrong you could be. How wrong can you be? Like, take a topic and be like, I'm awesome at this topic. How many cracks can I find? What are certain things? I mean, as I showed you when you came in, you seen the medals on the wall, all that running. Man, I did so much wrong. I did a lot of right, which I was happy to find out. Like, phew, okay, at least that, because I was doing it with a client. But I did a lot wrong. From nutrition to physiological, the adaptation that we spoke about, to therapeutic alliance with my client. I did a lot of wrong. And if I could find out something I'm wrong, it's that one step that I'm going to find something that I could be right. Or I could learn is the better way of saying that. And I think in physio, I think it would probably be safe to assume that the moment we think we know everything, you're done. You're done. You're everything we spoke about, all those beautiful little bits, they're thrown out the window. But the moment you come back to school or you start to go like, what can I do? How can I scale up? What does scaling up mean? It means making more money. No. Okay, sure. That's one of the aspects. Let's not be completely false about it. But maybe it means reaching more people. Maybe it means giving a service that you fine-tuned and continue to fine-tune, and you're trying to find a way that you could reach 10 people at a specific moment instead of one. Maybe it's just you trying to be the best in your field, you know? And I think that that's kind of the loaded question where I think anybody could fit in that category. Sometimes in these fields that we're in, I think it's important for us to simply take a piece of that humble pie and just go, let me just for a moment not assume I know, but I don't know, for the greater good of the patient and the industry. What do you think about that?
It's, you know, I was going to say in physiotherapy, there's this thing that happens, but I would say this could happen in any career, in anything. The more time you spend, the less sometimes the less confident you become, perhaps, the more you feel like you know nothing. And I would say people who, you know, especially, like, I can't speak to people who have been doing things for 40 years. I have no business telling them anything. But if you've been in this game for a year or 5 or even 10, and I'll speak specifically to physiotherapy, and you think you know everything that relates to the field, whether it be physiologically, biologically, anatomically, or more so like on that social side, right? The psychological side of interacting with people. If you think you know how to help anyone with anything, and you've been doing this for a couple of years, I don't know you, whoever I'm speaking to right now,
Alfred.
but I can assure you, Alfred, that there is a 0% chance that you should be as confident as you are. And this shouldn't be taken as a negative, pessimistic take. It should be taken as one of humbleness, coming from a position where I practiced as a physio for 7 years. And even in the last session that I had with the last patient on my last day of work before I went back to school, I was like, okay, I should have known more about this.
Right.
I didn't realize that such and such condition exists, or such and such kind of personality traits could present in people and would pose a challenge for me. So, you know, that humble pie that you referred to, whether it be trying things out for ourselves and just seeing how they feel outside of like the biological adaptations that may, or the physiological adaptations that may happen, just knowing that there are things out there that we could spend some time learning about, and that there are going to be things that will challenge us, is critical. Because if you think you have the answer for everything, it's you, first of all, you don't, and second of all, that just implies that you are so trapped with these blinders on that you don't realize how much more there is out there.
There was a graph that I saw just recently.
The Dunning-Kruger effect
is
probably what you
That's
saw.
it. Exactly.
Yeah.
That's it. That's it.
Your level of confidence
Yeah.
when you're youngest, greenest, freshest
Yeah.
is super high.
Yep.
And then you go through this phase where you're like, holy crap, I know nothing.
Yeah.
And then you finally work your way back out of it,
Yeah.
but you never get back to that same level of confidence that you
Oh,
once
yeah.
had.
Yeah.
Because you now are aware of the fact that, hey, you know what? This universe is vast.
Yeah.
There's always going to be something that I don't know about. And if I think I know everything, it's only because I don't realize what the things are that I don't know.
You never forget the taste of the humble pie.
Right?
Like, you're just going to be like, yeah. And I think that's, you know, that's what it comes down to. You know, just trying to, whatever field you're in, first and foremost, like, especially this field, I was just going to say, focus on helping people. Just focus. Because that's so much. Everything becomes easier. If you're focused on helping people, this is going to make everything better, because then you'll be open to everything you got to learn and whichever. Now, that being said, we could both probably sit here, you know, wipe the schedules for the rest of the day and keep on talking. I think another talk might be needed. But I usually say, where can people find you, this and that? But right now, you're dialed in. You're about to finish your MBA, and then come back here and we'll create a business together. But so I guess there's not really a moment to direct people in your direction, or if there is, direct them and just kind of, let us off in that way. So is there a way specifically?
Sure. Look, I'm still on all the socials. I'm definitely kind of head down right now, figuring some things out and scheming for my next move, whether that be in healthcare or not. But one thing that I didn't get to mention is, and to your point again of helping people, and that's why we do what we do, and that's why indirectly we're sharing this podcast because we're hoping it can help someone in some way, right?
Yeah.
Whether it be through education, whether it be about making your services more, people more aware of your services, whatever it may be. That's kind of the point of this and of everything that we're doing here. Feel free to connect with me on Instagram. I still every now and then share some of my thoughts on physiotherapy and on rehab. And one of the things that I wanted to mention is I guess you can call it kind of like pro bono fitness and rehab consultations. I have a passion for this stuff. I help people kind of all the time with just whether it be making adjustments to a program or helping them find a way or some motivation to get started, or giving them some sort of information that might help them debunk something that they read about online. So whatever it may be, my Instagram, it's my first name and my last name. It's pretty simple. It's JessMessias. I'm sure Kevin can put it in the in the handle. But beyond me, like that's kind of all I had to say on that front. But I want to say to you, Kevin, the work you are doing, rebranding yourself right now, this continuous pursuit of education and bettering yourself, always with the goal of helping other people, is so incredibly commendable. If 1% of, and not to sound pessimistic, but if 1% of our industries felt the same passion that you do for helping people, I think we'd be in a really, really good place, and there'd be more of those 7-year-old, 9-year-old grandmas and grandpas kicking around and doing all that stuff. So all I have to say is kudos to you. Keep up the amazing work. I'm going to continue to watch every single one of these podcasts and to tune in and to catch all the content. You've got a beautiful space here. Maybe some plans in the future to make some changes to it. I'm not sure, but whatever it is that you're going to do, I have absolutely no doubt in my mind that you are going to have success. I don't know how much longer you'll be able to stay on the carnivore diet, but in life and in work, I wish you all the best. And thank you so much for having me on today. This was a blast. Microphone or not, I could do this forever.
I appreciate it very much so, very much so. So yeah, just quickly, if anybody wants to get in contact with you, I'll put that information down low that they could just click on that. And really the pleasure was mine. I feel that this platform that I've created is actually putting me in touch with individuals that it's just happening. And these individuals, I feel, that are becoming this network that I want to create. I don't have an idea, but I always have some ideas, and I feel that I'm very, very, very blessed to be able to sit down and have conversations, especially for today. Thank you so much for setting time aside. I know everyone gets busy these days, but thank you so much. And I don't plan on stopping harassing you on Messenger and whatnot. What do I do? But I guess until next time, because I really would like a next time. Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Of course, man.
All right. Take care, man.
Cheers.